Welcome back everyone, it's Eric from Rare Candy. Here today we are back with another Vivid Voltage deck profile, taking a look at a new single prize deck, and that is going to be Whimsicott that we have here. So going through the set, I actually noticed there's a kind of a decent amount actually of semi-viable one prize Pokemon, and Whimsicott definitely being among them. This is one that I was actually really looking forward to trying out. I knew I wanted to show off on the channel in some capacity. So that is what we are going to have today. But before we get into the actual meat and potatoes of this deck profile, just a couple things for housekeeping. Real quick, if you guys can, smack that like button. Genuinely really does help get this video seen by more people on YouTube. Really would be appreciated. Also, our patrons at patreon.com/rarecandytcg also had early access to this deck list like a week in advance. It might have even been a little bit more than that. So if you guys want some early access content or some exclusive content as well, I'll have a link down below in the description if you guys want to help support this channel and get some cool stuff in the process. And one more thing too, in the next couple days, there will be a live match being posted showing off this deck in action. So if you are interested in some more Whimsicott content, stay tuned to the channel as that will be posted in the coming days. Link will be in the description when that happens. But with that being said, let's hop into the actual deck profile. Up first, we do have 4 copies of Cottony here. So Cottony, of course, we do need this to evolve into our Whimsicott. And I'm choosing to play this one really just because of the attack. There's a couple different ones that we have in format, but I like the one here from Unified Minds just because for a colorless energy, just draw a card. The other ones are like 1 energy for 10. I think most of the time that's going to be somewhat inconsequential. So if we're attacking with Cottony, we're probably in a bad spot. So I'd prefer just to draw a card if we kind of have the option to do so. Up next from there, of course, we have 4 copies of Whimsicott. This is going to be our main / only attacker, really, in the deck. So Whimsicott, of course, a new card from Vivid Voltage, 90 HP, free retreat, metal weakness. It has 2 attacks. The first one for a colorless, I believe, is just draw 3, which is fine, nothing special. But its second attack is really the star of the show here. For a psychic energy, you discard as many tool cards as you want from your side of the field, and it does 10 plus 40 for each one you discard. Meaning if we discard all 6 from all of our Pokemon, we're going to be hitting for 250 with a single prize Pokemon for 1 energy. That's kind of hard to scoff at, you know? So I really do like this attack a lot. It really reminds me of the old Gourgeist back from Crimson Invasion. But I think this card actually has a few extra tools, no pun intended, at its disposal that Gourgeist previously did not. So this is what the entire deck is going to be based around with this card. Just trying to discard as many tool cards as we can to keep that steady stream of 250 over and over. 250 is actually a pretty good number too, because we knock out basically any single prize Pokemon, all of the 2 prize Pokemon, and even things like Pikarom. I think that's probably the only 3 prize Pokemon we're knocking out that doesn't have psychic weakness. So the numbers this thing hits for is largely pretty strong, I think. Up next from there, we have 4 copies of Jirachi. This is going to be the new one from Vivid Voltage, not the old Stellar Wish one. I think this one probably makes a little bit more sense in this particular deck. But this is one of these new amazing rare cards. We're not really playing it for its crazy attack. We're really just playing it for this ability. We get to look at the top 2 cards of our deck. We get to keep one of them, and we return the other to the top of our deck. So the reason we're playing this instead of something like the Stellar Wish Jirachi is because we're already playing a large amount of retreat cost reducing cards like Air Balloon and U-Turn Board, meaning if we can get one of these Jirachis and play with one of those, I mean, we're always basically going to have a great Pokemon to promote in between turns every time your opponent is going to take a knockout on you. So playing the 4 also increases our odds of starting with it, though if you do want to maybe cut 1 or 2, I mean, that'll be up to you, but I like the 4 count just because it increases our odds of starting with it. And up next from there, we have 2 copies of Squavit, as surprising as that may seem. So we are choosing to play the one from, I believe this is Darkness Ablaze, if I'm remembering correctly. But we're playing this one because it has this attack. It's 1 for 40, but you flip a coin of tails, it does nothing. But the 40 damage is actually surprisingly relevant against certain things. So think of something like ADP as an example. Let's say we're going to hit it for 250 with our Whimsicott, and we don't have a Whimsicott on the next turn to clean up that knockout with. We can maybe come in with Squavit and potentially get a knockout. There's other things too, like think of something like Mewtwo Mew. If they have a Jirachi GX in play, we're going to be a little bit shy of taking that knockout, and something like this would come in and help us be able to do that. So nothing groundbreaking with the card, but I think this is probably the preferred one in the deck. And then from there, we have 2 copies of Greedent. So this is going to be our stage 1 support Pokemon of choice. We're actually not playing Garbodor at all in this deck, which might surprise some people, but bear with me through this deck profile. I think you'll see more and more why as time goes on. But we're playing this Greedent for the Greedy Tail ability. Once during your turn, you can search your deck for a Pokemon tool card and put it into your hand. So I really like this ability, obviously because we can search out tool cards to discard with our Whimsicott. But one of the things I really do like about this style of ability is the fact that this deck really gets screwed by Marnie in particular. So like we play U-turn board in this list, as you'll see. We're going to discard them with Whimsicott, get them all back to our hand, and then they'll go to the bottom of our deck if our opponent plays Marnie. And having this ability reshuffles the order of our deck, getting those tool cards closer to the top, and also gets us a card in the process. So Greedent is just going to help us find those tools when we need them. Effectively, this ability reads plus 40 damage per turn, which is, I think, a pretty good ability to have. Up next from there, we have one copy of Latios GX. And I think this is really one of the main cards that makes this deck potentially viable. So Latios, it has this GX attack, Clear Vision GX. Neither player can use GX attacks for the rest of the game. And the reason this is so important is, of course, because of that, very annoying Altered Creation GX attack that we have on ADP, which is really one of the, I think, in my opinion, one of the worst things about the state of the game right now is that one archetype basically makes one prize Pokemon unplayable, just basically because of the GX attack. So if you come in with Latios early on before they use their Altered Creation, we can shut that off and actually have a chance at winning the matchup. So the fact that Whimsicott naturally already plays Psychic Energy is something that's really nice because Latios can naturally sort of slot into the deck as a one-of. Now, of course, you do have to keep in mind, you can only use this GX attack if you have 5 Pokemon on your bench. So that is definitely a little bit annoying, but this definitely gives us an out to ADP, whereas previously we would not have one. Up next from there, we have one copy of Oricorio GX, another cool Psychic GX Pokemon for this deck. Of course, we're playing it for the Dance of Tribute ability. If one of our Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn, you get to draw 3 cards. So one thing I've noticed, every turn we're going to be discarding our tool cards from play. We're probably going to lose a stage 1 from play as well. And so generally we need a good bit every turn to keep those stream of KOs coming on our end. So Oricorio is just another way at making that happen. You have to think, if you have a Jirachi and Oricorio in play, every time your opponent takes a knockout on your next turn, you can see, basically up to 5 cards. You can keep 4 of them, but you can see up to 5 additional cards, which definitely makes a difference every turn. And to round out our Pokemon, we have one copy of the Dene GX for that Dene Change ability. So like I said, this deck is somewhat combo reliant, especially in the early game. Before you found all your U-turn boards, you still might be looking for a lot of tool cards. You might still be looking for a couple stage 1s. And if you don't have what you need off a Professor's Research, the Dene, of course, is going to be good in those situations, or just bailing you out of a dead hand if you want. So going on to our trainer cards, of course, we have 4 copies of Professor's Research. It's going to be one of the best draw supporters we have in the game. And likewise, we have 4 copies of Marnie, a very, very generic sort of a draw supporter line. But Research, great, just discard your hand, draw 7. But for those turns we don't want to, we have Marnie to force both players to shuffle their hands, put them at the bottom of their deck. We get 5, our opponent gets 4. And like I said, Marnie is a card that is particularly annoying against this deck, so you'll have to watch out for opposing decks that play Marnie. One thing I had in one iteration of this deck was Ingo and Emmett, much like in the Greedent deck I posted a couple months ago now, to kind of Marnie-proof yourself a little bit. So that's something I might potentially attempt to inject back into this list at some point. But right now, Marnie, just the straight Marnie Research combo seems generally pretty consistent, so I'm sticking with that for the moment. And up next from there to round out our supporters, just 3 copies of Boss's Orders to switch our opponent's active with one of their bench Pokemon. So a very, very generic supporter lineup in this deck, but hey, it gets the job done most of the time. Next up, we have 4 copies of U-turn board. This is definitely, I think, the card that, debatably makes this deck tick. So the Whimsicott, it's very similar to the old Gourgeist from back in the day. Gourgeist didn't really see too much play, but to be fair, it didn't have a card like U-turn board. I think this really helps out this type of archetype. So U-turn board, it does reduce your retreat cost by 1, which is great to use with things like Jirachi. But the thing that makes this card good is that when it gets discarded from play, it comes back to your hand, meaning whenever we discard these with Whimsicott, we can get all 4 back into our hand to just slap down on the next turn and be ready to go. And because these come back to your hand, this is actually kind of the reason I'm choosing to not play Garbodor, because Garbodor, while I think at a glance does look like it has a lot of synergy with Whimsicott, it does more damage for tool cards in your discard pile. And I think this effect of just being able to have 4 tools to use every single turn repeatedly To me, I thought that seemed a little bit more attractive, which is why we are not going the Carboda route for this particular list. Up next from there, we have 4 copies of Air Balloon in the deck, so very similar to U-turn board, but this is just going to give us a -2 retreat cost. We primarily want to focus on these tool cards that benefit us on our turn, just because we're going to discard our tools at the end of our turn. So having, tool cards that have strong effects on our opponent's turn don't really make too much sense, because more than likely we're actually not going to be able to get those effects before they get discarded from play. So that's why we are opting to max out all of our free retreating sort of tool card. This will basically ensure we're never going to have something in the active that we don't want. And also too, if we do need to quickly find a Latios GX and get clear vision off, we do need to make sure we have a way at switching into that. So that's another thing that helps us out with Latios actually as well. And of course with Jirachi, I think that's going to be the main card these sort of pair nicely with. So up next from there, we have 4 copies of Quick Ball in the deck. Definitely probably our best searching card that we have. Discard a card from your hand, search your deck for a basic Pokemon. Pretty self-explanatory stuff there. We also have 3 copies of Pokemon Communication in the deck as well. So Communication, we put a Pokemon from hand back into our deck and search for a different one. So of course, this not only helps find our basic Pokemon in the early game, but can help find us those evolutions on following turns as well. And similarly, we're also playing 3 copies of Great Ball as well. So Great Ball, we get to look at the top 7 cards of our deck. We pick a Pokemon we find there, put it into our hand, then shuffle our deck. So Great Ball, it's a little bit unpredictable about what you're going to get, but we really do want a lot of Pokemon in play, I have found. We want to find multiple Cottonies to get them in play. We need to get at least 1 Squavit on the bench pretty early on as well. So being able to have some additional Pokemon search is definitely good. Especially, again, when talking about Latios, we need a bunch of Pokemon in play. So having plenty of Pokemon search options is only going to help that. And for the last of our Pokemon tool cards, we're playing 3 copies of Lucky Egg as well. So generally speaking, guys, like I said, we're going to be preferring tool cards that benefit us on our turn, not our opponents. But I do like Lucky Egg here because let's say we are attacking our opponent, but we don't have a supporter for next turn or any good follow-up. We can maybe leave Lucky Egg on the active while discarding the rest of our tools. And if our active gets knocked out, we can refill our hand size to 7. So of course, whenever something gets knocked out, we refill our hand size to 7, which is pretty good. It does sometimes conflict with U-turn board, just because U-turn board does come back to your hand. But especially early on, if you're having trouble getting set up, sometimes Lucky Egg can bail you out of a dead hand. Looking through the card pool, I think it was kind of hard to figure out what tool cards would even be good here outside of Air Balloon and U-turn board. I think those were the obvious ones. I think if you wanted to switch up any other tool cards, the other one that I want to probably try out in future iterations of this list will be Giant Bomb. I think that could easily slot into this same spot just because Giant Bomb technically deals more damage than it would take away if you discarded it. So feel free to play around with those slots. I think these are the flexible tools in the list for sure. And to round out our trainer cards, we have 2 copies of Ordinary Rod as well. So as you can see, we have no backup attacker. Since we aren't playing Garbodor or anything like that, we're going all in on Whimsicott. And if we prize an Ordinary Rod or have to discard it early with Professor's Research, I'm actually not convinced that we're going to have the resources needed to close out a game. So Ordinary Rod, I think we're playing the second one just as more of insurance for in case we miss out on the first one for some reason. But of course, for Ordinary Rod, we get to get up to 2 Pokemon and up to 2 basic energies from discard and put them back into our deck. So up next from there, we have 4 copies of Horror Psychic Energy. This is definitely a card that I'm excited to be able to use with Whimsicott here. So of course, this provides just Psychic Energy, but if the Pokemon it's attached to is a Psychic type and gets damaged by your opponent's attack, they take 2 damage counters. And this 2 damage counters actually does wind up mattering from time to time. So think of something like Mewtwo Mew. Let's say they have Jirachi GX in play, you hit them for 250. If they attack back into you with that same Mewtwo Mew, they're going to get knocked out, coming back into your turn. Similarly, too, if we attack into a Zacian and we don't have all of our tool cards needed to knock it out, we're going to leave it with just 10 HP. And again, Horror Psychic can come in and finish them off for us. And from there, we have just 3 copies of basic Psychic Energy to round out the deck. So we're just a single energy attacker. We really don't need too many to actually attack in this deck. So between these and the Ordinary Rods, we should have plenty of energy to keep us going throughout the course of a game. So that's going to be our look here at the Whimsicott deck. Like I said at the beginning of this video, guys, I actually have been enjoying this. I think the fact that we have U-Turn Board and Latios GX in particular are really the things that make this deck potentially a contender in terms of one prize decks out there. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video too, guys, if you do want to see some more Whimsicott content, whenever the live match featuring this deck goes up, I will have a link down below in the description for you to check that one out as well. That's going to wrap up things for today. If you guys did enjoy today's content, of course, smack that like button and subscribe to the channel. And of course, if you can, consider giving your support by going to patreon.com/rarecandytcg or by picking up some merch from rarecandytcg.com. It would mean a lot. But as always, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.